Hi, yeah. So, do you want me to just jump in?
Mhm.
Yeah, so thank you. That is correct. My name is Cecilia Garcia-Linz. I use she, her pronouns. I am located in Lansing, Michigan, on the forcibly ceded land of the Anishinaabe Three Fires Confederacy. I have worked for Sierra Club for about 14 years. I was the administrative assistant for a long time because that allowed them to plug me into any fun project without worrying about funding issues. And now, last year, at the end of last year, we were able to create a volunteer engagement coordinator position to focus just solely on engaging with volunteers and helping them get involved with our work. So I'm from this community. I was born in Lansing, grew up about a half an hour north of here, came back around high school time, and my wife is from Meridian Township, spent a lot of time there. I know a lot of folks that are doing great work in your community. Was really excited to meet Kim at the last luncheon that was held in our office. So, if you don't mind, I'll share my screen and I'll kind of give you a little overview of what Sierra Club is, and then I'll go through it a little faster than most because I really want to make time for Q&A and get you caught up on what we're doing currently. So I'm going to. I, for once, don't have 500 tabs open, so I think my colleagues would be proud of me right here. Hmm. Hold on, I think it's sharing the wrong tab. Try this again. Can you see the
Yeah,
screen? It says volunteering as the ultimate.
yes, we see it.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay, so we're going to go back to the beginning there. My screen is doing something weird, so I'm just going to ignore it. Uh, so Sierra Club is the oldest and largest grassroots environmental network organization in the country. I work for the Michigan chapter. Sierra Club is a multi-tiered organization. So we have the national level that works on national things, the state level, and then each state has little local groups because local grassroots organizing is how real change happens. So Sierra Club was founded in 1892. The Ch Michigan chapter came around in 1965. So Michigan chapter's been around for 60 years. Our mission is to explore, enjoy, and protect the wild places of the earth. We very much believe that if people are able to access outdoors, one, that's a human right, but also when they spend time in these natural places, they love them and then want to protect them. We work with volunteers. Nationally, we have 20,000 outings a year, 3.8 million members and supporters, and 64 local chapters. We also have a lot of networks and teams that are not in that count. So it's a pretty robust and disparate team. In Michigan, we have currently 13,000 members. That doesn't count our supporters. That bumps us up a little bit more. 865 of those people are life members, and we have members who represent in all 83 counties, which is incredibly important when we do things like legislative citizen lobbying. Sierra Club values center around anti-racism, balance, collaboration, justice, and transformation. We follow the Hamas principles of democratic organizing. We try to do everything in a just and equitable way. Um, so I will share the slide deck also with your team, if that helps after the call. Anti-racism, we commit to shifting power away from white supremacy, repairing harm, and ending structural racism. Um, our balance is our effectiveness, um, that reciprocity of community care, right? Which I think that Meridian Township has a really great grasp on how like you work together and organize together. And you can see the definitions you're capable of reading, so I won't take up too much time with this. Um, I will play this really quick video about our core values. Maybe it doesn't want to play today. Well, okay. Well, the core. I wonder if that we have a new comms person who might be working on that and changing that video. They just started last week. We're very excited. So they might have disabled the link to update something. So the core values is just going over what we just shared. So the overview of the Michigan chapter, we have 150,000 members and supporters combined. That's very powerful. We actually think we have 12 staff now. Um, because we just got our accounts person we had waited so long for. We have 5 regional groups, but we also have a lot of networks, like I said. And then we have volunteer-led committees. Volunteers lead those groups as well, but they also lead our committees like our executive committee, the legislative, political, conservation. We now have a microplastics committee. There's a team working on CAFOs. We have something that fits everyone's passion and interest. This is a quick view of our chapter staff. Elaine Coleman is amazing. She started out as an intern with Michigan many years, well, not many, but years ago. She's young, she's bright, she's talented, she's doing amazing things with the work that we're doing. And then you can see we have people who work on water, we have political and legislative teams, we have a forest ecologist, we have clean energy organizers, and now we have an amazing digital and communications strategy specialist. If you want to sign up to learn more about Sierra Club, you can always go to sierraclub.org/Michigan and sign up for our twice weekly email newsletters and get plugged in other ways. Our state priorities, of course, shifting a little bit with the current situation of things being in flux. We are really adaptable, though. We're gonna, continue to combat climate change, and so right now that looks like protecting key environmental winds from the chaos that's happening right now. Invest in clean energy and renewable energy at all levels. Prioritize funding for mitigation and adaptation programs, weatherization, things like that. Um, we don't get very much federal funding, but because there are IRA state funds and other resources that we can push to programs in Michigan and help advocate for those programs to have access to those funds. Protecting and restoring the Great Lakes ecosystem, that is huge. Shutting down Line 5, as we all know, it's it's a very dangerous pipeline, and it's frustrating to constantly be to still be in this battle. We've been fighting it for a long time, but we're not giving up, and there are new ways to engage with that. I feel like continuously there's I feel like there's ways for us to like combat legislation or participate in a demonstration or partner with the indigenous communities. Prevent agricultural runoff and waste. We have amazing work happening combating CAFOs and keeping our land and water safe from agricultural pollution and combating plastic pollution. We have a microplastics team. We have other teams that are working on fighting really bad legislation that would kind of expand plastic recycling and pyrolysis. And there are other ways to get involved with that work. Promoting environmental and racial justice. This is huge. We believe that everything that we do should be done from a standpoint of equity and accessibility. Protecting and growing our democracy. We added last year it was just growing our democracy, and this year it's like protecting it, right? Because we understand that everything is connected and what's happening will have huge impacts on our environment. For example, we know that there's a funding threat to the sea lamprey project that's been happening to protect the Great Lakes from sea lampreys. We just shared something on Sierra Club's Michigan chapter Facebook page that came from Sierra Magazine. And 10 days later, we saw that the funding, that program is being threatened. So we have to protect our environment from the chaos that's happening. And then protecting our biodiversity, really how we engage with policy, engaging with comment periods. There are a lot of ways that citizens can actually have more of a voice in how the agencies that work on protecting our biodiversity make decisions. How we do this work, almost all of our work, especially at the Michigan chapter, is funded by our members, their membership dues, member donations, and our supporters. We do get some tax-deductible C3 funding from the Sierra Club Foundation, which is legally a separate entity than the Sierra Club. So tax-deductible donations fund our education and advocacy, and the C4 non-tax deductible funding and donations from our members and membership dues helps with direct lobbying around specific legislation that will protect our environment. Volunteering is the ultimate exercise in democracy, so there are lots of ways for us to get plugged in. I'm going to stop sharing my screen And then, you know, I can tell you right now that there's a tremendous amount of energy and excitement around getting involved and taking meaningful, impactful action beyond just like calling your senator or putting in, assigning a petition and emailing it. So there are a lot of ways, a lot of teams in Michigan that you can get involved with that are like also hopeful. So we have a garden club at the Michigan chapter where we share a space with Michigan Environmental Council, as Kim knows. It's a really big, beautiful space. There's a lot of landscaping. It doesn't look like it, but there's more landscaping than you would expect for a tiny downtown lot. And we are in the process of changing the landscape over from invasives or aggressive tropical plants and putting in as much natural landscape as possible, working to reduce rainwater runoff. So there's a team that works on that, and that team works um, and garden spaces and projects across the city as well. We also have a team that works with veterans because we know that healing power of nature is important, especially for groups like veterans. And so advocating for policies that make access to nature for veterans possible, as well as leading volunteer outings and hosting events for veterans. So there's a lot of fun ways to get plugged into our work that's not just fighting with politicians and legislators, I promise. So I'm going to pause there. I'll open it up for your discussion or questions.
That's great. Thank you. Who would like to start?
Sounds like you've got a pretty broad reach, broader than I imagined. How do you keep up on and prioritize your issues, or is that done nationally or?
So it's a combination. There are national issues in which we have coordinated campaigns and teams that in Michigan that work on those. So clean energy, clean transportation, transit to trails programs, those are priorities set by our national team. And then chapters, we rely heavily on volunteers to get involved with this work. Staff have a certain amount of capacity to move things forward. But what makes it possible to have such a wide reach of work is our volunteers. Our volunteers also help decide what we're doing. So in Michigan, our volunteer leadership looks at the priorities that National has because we're one organization. Everything has to align and be in compliance, right? But we also have the power to elevate our local issues that this is where we're focusing because it's a local issue and it's important. We need to deal with that. So we look at how we can combine those two things and then how we can share resources and then leverage the power of the grassroots volunteers across the state. So we have volunteers who show up for commenting periods, who show up to hearings, put on, around different issues so they can learn the facts, who work to like educate communities on issues that they're facing and help them get plugged in. So the power of volunteers.
Thank you. Sometimes it takes
Got
a
a,
minute to concoct questions. Go ahead, Kim. Sorry.
oh, nope. Sorry to interrupt. I was just going to ask, it sounds like the Trump administration is trying to weigh in on the tunnel proposal for Line 5. Do you have any additional information on that, or what's the Sierra Club's position?
Yeah, so we released a statement. We're obviously pushing back and digging in on that. It has been fast tracked for approval by the Trump administration. We have serious concerns. We have had serious concerns about the process all along, and are frustrated that we haven't been able to get it shut down. We are working with our partners at Oil and Water Don't Mix around several protest actions, having people communicate with their senators and representatives to show up and make comments for the Army Corps of Engineer when those opportunities arise. So we definitely have a list of actions. I know a list of actions is coming in this morning, so I would want to, I can share that out with this group after and share our statement on line 5. But essentially, there was a line 5 lobbying day yesterday where we had Sierra Club leaders and volunteers in DC talking with legislators about how dangerous fast tracking this would be.
So can you help me understand where was it at during the Biden administration? And then now, I mean, I'm not surprised at the way that it's going, but what was happening and maybe stalled or not happening during when Biden was in?
I think essentially, to be frank on this, and this isn't like I'm not the Line 5 team expert, but what I know from our work, um, there there is a lot of hesitancy to hold big oil corporations liable and responsible for what they're doing. And there is too much money from these big corporations in politics influencing the decision makers. So we were incredibly frustrated that Whitmer didn't come in stronger to shut it down, but we also know that, the governor is has other political aspirations, wants to be very pro-business. And there's a lot of misinformation around alternative energy sources for Line 5. The Biden administration did some amazing things for the environment, but there were also places where they did not push far enough, and in other places just weren't where we needed them to be. And that's sort of the frustration that we have had. We've all environmental organizations are starting to look at now, like how do we really interact with these elected officials? Let's say we're endorsing them and then they don't do what they're supposed to be doing, right? Like we saw a lot of Democrats not be strong in the way they needed to. We had a trifecta that should have been much more effective for environmental protections and just wasn't so. All the environmental groups coalesced in a way that we hadn't seen in decades. And that was a great wake-up call for us to re-examine how we interact and really get these politicians to do the right thing, because really it was just a lack of political appetite to stand up to big oil and say, no, we're not putting this under a huge amount of the world's fresh water.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Talking further about Line 5, and where, I mean, I just read a little about it, and it seems like it's at this stage a legal issue, a big legal issue. And then you got the problem with the Army Corps of Engineers, and we don't have any hopes for trying to influence their decisions because for obvious reasons. And so, you kind of scratch your head and kind of think, now, really, how can you know, really influence the decision? It seems like it's gone so far. The governor, attorney general have done certain things. What would you advise? Because it seems like one of those issues that as a citizen, it'll be really hard to impact.
It is, but I think as citizens, what we can do is like remain informed, remain active, keep putting those voices out there, and then help support organizations who are working on those legal pathways, litigation, because and it's it's an expensive endeavor. And what we know is that big corporations can afford this. So, for example, Greenpeace USA is currently being sued with a SLAPP lawsuit, which is it's a strategic lawsuit against public participation, right? Um, a giant Energy Transfer is a giant energy corporation that's behind the Dakota Access Pipeline. They're falsely accusing Greenpeace of planning the no Dakota Access Pipeline resistance when really they had a very minimal interaction with it, standing in solidarity with the indigenous people of Standing Rock. So in retaliation, now they lost at the federal level and it's down at the state appeals level, I believe. I'll have to check that which level it's at. They lost, Energy Transfer lost one lawsuit, but now they're appealing. It's in trial, just started this week. That lawsuit would sue them out of existence. It would greatly impact our freedom to protest, our freedom of speech. And I say that because that's going to have impacts on everything that we're doing. So right now, the legal pathways and supporting the organizations who are taking legal action on Line 5 is critical. And doing as much as we can to pressure the elected officials in the state of Michigan to do the right thing. I know about the Greenpeace because Sierra Club is represented by Progressive Workers Union. I was the president of that union for 2 years before I stepped down. We also represent Greenpeace USA and a host of other environmental nonprofits. And so I've had this inside view of what's happening there, right? And the legal challenges, it's tough right now because we know how the how the courts are. Like there are a lot of implications, but that legal pathway is critical right now. And that what happens there is going to kind of be the playbook for how Line 5 is attacked next.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing in terms of Standing Rock and curious how they relate and don't relate. And I And like if Standing Rock is officially done, so it's not officially done, like it's not officially off the table and or whatever.
I mean, I can't speak to that, but what I know right now is none of our public lands, none of these protected areas that we have been working on, all the places where big energy, big oil, fossil fuel industries have had, their eyes, like all of that is under threat if we don't corral the chaos that's happening right now and really get our elected officials and the legal all the checks and balances to really stand up for the environment right now, because the environment is that impacts everyone is going to lose when the environment is destroyed.
Mhm. Yeah.
One of the things that's, I'm sure on everyone's mind is the polarity between, left and right, Republican, Democrat, and it seems to me that if there are particular issues that we can agree on, we can make a lot more progress than, I know there's fighting is necessary at times, but are there areas where there's a lot of agreement that you see opportunities for collaboration on? Or do you want to address that issue in other ways?
No, I mean, I think that's a very great question, and I think that there are definitely opportunities. So, one, Sierra Club is a nonpartisan organization, right? And so we will work with anyone. Now, we tend to work with Democrats and more progressive leaders because they are the ones who are doing, for the most part, the protection of the environment from a policy and legislative standpoint. But we will work with anyone, and we do find areas that are common. And right now, we know that there are a lot of people who are unhappy with the impacts of what's going to happen to public health when some of their environmental protections go away. We know that rural communities, a large number of which voted for Trump, are heavily impacted by the funding cuts and by the environmental destruction of uh, animal factory farms, and things like that, right? And so there are a lot of places where we can agree that, no one voted for what's happening with Elon Musk and the funding cuts and the illegal funding freezes. Like no one voted for that. So when we were at the Capitol for a protest recently, there were people from both sides of the aisle who were unhappy about that, right? And when we keep people focused on the issue, we have a lot more common ground. And I think that anytime that there's chaos and fear, there's also opportunity for growth and change. And this may be the catalyst, the moment where we get people to stop thinking about party alignment and party loyalty and start thinking about loyalty to your, the environment that you need to survive in, the environment that your loved ones need to survive in, right? And that's how we go. So really just continuing to have those conversations and spaces with people who are willing to talk and willing to listen is critical right now. And so we find ourselves working with groups that we traditionally haven't worked with as often.
Thank you.
Just chiming in on that area of that's nonpartisan. It's at least it's always been said in a lot of conversations that I've been in that Great Lakes Restoration Initiative funding is nonpartisan and that everybody loves it. But then when we see things like this sea lamprey, well, of course, that wasn't GLRI funding. Maybe it wasn't. I'm not sure where the funding was for all the National Park Service employees to put chemicals in the rivers to, eradicate sea lamprey. But I mean, this just doesn't make any sense for our state to let loose all these invasive critters that destroy our fishing industry. And how, even if there is a kibosh on the staff that's been doing it, isn't there a way to scrape up some GLRI funding somewhere and take care of this problem? I mean, I'm not close enough to know, but it seems like it could be fixed.
So GLI funding is definitely something that we've started talking about in the last, I mean, we're always talking about in the last couple of weeks, we've been really concerned about like what will happen with GLRI. And you're right, that's something that traditionally both sides have been behind. What we need is one, funnel some good people to office. If you know good people, like let's get them in office and let's start with the local levels where it really makes a difference. Because what we need is people to stand up and not be afraid of like, oh, I'm going to risk my career or I don't want to be retaliated against if I stand up to because there is no reason to what's happening. And that's by design, right? There's no reason it's to create chaos, it's to create cruelty, right? It's to keep us so in survival mode that we can't pay attention to the things that we really need to. So keep an alert with other organizations on what that GLRI, and I saw someone put a meeting on my calendar for early next week that just says GLRI combo. So I'm excited to hear what comes from that. But like really, we have to have people showing up to coffee hours to talk to their legislators, holding them accountable, asking questions, showing up at their office and districts. We have a lobby day coming up. There are other lobby days happening. I think there's a Great Lakes Water Day. There's another lobby day I just got a notice about yesterday in my email. Um, right. And demanding that these elected officials do their job and stand up and say, like, no, we're not going to vote for this. This makes no sense, right?
Mhm.
Um, right now it's hard to find the people who are willing to do that. And we've also seen nonprofit organizations capitulating. I noticed that it was maybe I shouldn't say this, but I noticed another nonprofit, I'll just leave it at that, changed all of their materials to reflect the Gulf of America, right? And rolling back DEI and and things like that. So nonprofits are not necessarily inherently the good guys if they feel like funding is a threat. And the same with elected officials, right? But what's different about Sierra Club and some other groups is that the members are, really believe in the mission, right? And so we don't have, well, we will have, every organization will have struggles with approach, especially one of our size. But what we have is a tremendous amount of people in the communities who care about this, who are willing to rise up and say, we are not going to be silent, right? And then you start showing by where you're putting your dollars, where you're putting your votes, um, where you are spending your time with organizations and communities to affect that change and that difference that we need. That's right now, that's where it's at. I can't think of very many politicians who are standing up strongly against what's happening and saying like, no, we will not let this happen. It's still pretty much party line voting, right?
Are there, I'm also a volunteer with Voters Not Politicians and a member of the League of Women Voters, and I attend most, if not all, of Sam Singh's coffee hours as a legislative liaison between the NP and the senator. And he has always impressed me with being more on board and concerned about environmental issues. And I was wondering if there are senators or reps that you feel are really detrimental to environmental causes, or any that you particularly praise for their efforts. And secondly, I know that have been cuts to the National Park Service with regard to the lamprey, and then just recently they're cutting EPA positions out of the Chicago office, and how that might affect things here in Michigan.
Right. Well, we know that I think it was 12 positions. Debbie Dingle was speaking at a climate rally recently, and I think there was 12 positions that were being eliminated, and they managed to, to prevent, I think, six maybe or seven from being cut in our region. But I know that more cuts were coming after, and it's all happening very fast. I can't speak with confidence on it. It obviously will have an effect on what's happening. We're already seeing, like the biggest concern for us around these cuts is how are people going to be able to visit state parks if there's no one there to let them in? There's no one there to clean the bathrooms. There's no one there to make sure that people are safe on the trails and on the lines, right? It's just no one there to make the park operate, right? That's going to be hugely impactful for the environment, and because people will still find a way in, and they're just and it's just going to become. If you remember what some of these places were like in the 70s and early 80s before we really got behind cleaning up and leave no trace and anti-litter campaigns and things like that. As far as politicians, there are definitely some, like Rashida Tlaib is always great. Debbie Dingle has been a pretty strong environmental champion. Debbie Stabenow on some issues, it's not as exactly as we aligned, but has been fairly great. I won't go into too much detail because this is really an area that is more appropriate for my political and legislative team. But what I can do is follow up with this call and share where we have like our environmental scorecard that lists how people do. We have a criteria for how we rank politicians, and all of our elected officials, not all of them, but for the most part, senators and representatives on their environmental uh, record. And so there are definitely a lot of people with R's behind their names that have been very unhelpful and dangerous to our environment. And those scores are reflected in that card there too. I also know that like relationships are challenging, so I never like to speak for my political and legislative team because sometimes they are working to bring someone along and like I don't want to say something that like, oh yeah, he used to be this way, but now he's kind of, so I always refer to that environmental scorecard. And then if you stay plugged into, you sign up for the Sierra Club e-newsletters, there's a lot of information there about what's happening and what our representatives are doing for or against the environment.
Thank you.
I should probably know this, but I don't. So I'm gonna have to ask if you're not. Well, I do know Debbie Dingle is a great spokesman for the environment, spokesperson for the environment. Um, but can you I used to communicate with her when I worked in Detroit, but now that I'm up north, and then I tried to do a few letters to our Congress people, and it seems like you have to be in their district when you go. There's these forms when you go and plug in to try to give them a message. They want to make sure what zip code you're in and all this business. So I don't know if that's, am I not informed enough to know how to get around that, or
No,
maybe.
so it's a professional courtesy. If you're not in a representative's district, they will pass that along to your district representative. But they will also note, and their staff will note, like, hey, you're getting a lot of communication from people even outside of your district, all over the state, who want you as an environmental champion. And they either want to support and thank you for what you're doing, or they want you, like encourage you to take a strong stance on this because it affects the entire state. So I think that's the issue that you're running into. They usually will, as a professional courtesy, not engage with another constituent from a different district. You'll get like a canned thank you or something like that, and then it's passed on to your representative, your senator.
So you maybe not, even if you try to write something, if I try to write something to Debbie, she might not see it. It'll just automatically go to my guy up here up north.
Yeah, I mean, someone on her team will usually note it and then pass it on. It's also really, really helpful to engage with their staff. The staff are incredibly knowledgeable and are
Yeah,
able to really kind of sift through and move some important stuff. So I find a lot of the progress that we make is a lot of groundwork initially in the relationship with the staff. They're incredibly knowledgeable. They're very generous with their time when, as long as they have it. And they're incredibly helpful and impactful in the work that gets moved forward in the offices.
that's a good point. And in a lot of communication I've done has been with their staff, with these people's staff. It's much easier. They're much more easy to get a hold of without question.
Yeah, and they have the questions, and they're usually pretty honest about, if there's a stance or there's not a stance, or, and a lot of our representatives they can't be experts on everything, right? So a lot of times we are coming to them as citizen lobbyists with information that they might not have or know. And the staff are generally inquisitive about the questions that they think that their rep might have for us, or things that they have themselves that they want to kind of look into before they bring it to the rep. And then also, like, if you're able to travel to when if there's ever an appearance in that area, or if you're able to make a trip down and go to an office hours or coffee hours, that's important too. So we have, when we do our lobby days, it's really important that the people who live in the district are the ones going to the office, and sometimes other folks will tag along and you'll visit each other's reps if you have a small team. But it's really important to be able to connect directly with your district.
Cecilia, there's some comments in the chat. I don't know if you've been able to see them or not. But I just want to draw you to those.
Yes, these are great comments. I've been keeping up with them. Like, yeah, the Department of Education, my spouse works in higher ed. That's, a concerning. I think we all know what, there's a long game of divestment in education to make it easier to manipulate the systems and the people. Um, and yes, the Dems do not have a very deep bench. And then we also really need to talk about like, again, this is not necessarily my lane. But we also need to talk about like how are they recruiting and bringing people in and voices in to be a Democratic representative? Because sometimes the people that I see doing the real work in the community are often not embraced because they're considered too progressive or like not winnable or not well enough known or not old enough to be on a Democratic platform, right? Which is a concern. We need to be really ensuring that the voices that are the most impacted are the ones that are given the platforms, and the people from the communities are able to lead the communities because they know what the communities need. We can't just keep going in and like, I'm going to come here and save you, like either as a rep or an organization or a volunteer, right? It's working in collaboration, like, hey, this issue is affecting me. It's affecting you too. How can we work together? What can I do to like help you? How can we work together in collaboration? What resources can we share? What information and knowledge can we share? Making things and designing things with accessibility in mind for everyone. And that means a lot of different things. It can mean language, it can mean childcare, it can mean transportation. Um, it can, there are a lot of things that we need to change about the systems in order to get real impact to all communities.
Well, and I attended the Michigan Recycling Coalition seminar a couple months ago. And one of the things that they said in that was that the plastic, there were some bills, or I can't remember exactly what it was, that they said was not going to go through because the Democrats couldn't agree on the approach to how to do that process of that bill and that kind of thing. And I just was trying to go and learn and understand and pay attention to it. But I thought, man, you've got this, like you said, this trifecta, and you can't get things done because you don't have a center focus on, and I get that, but also just like finally we had it and we couldn't even get stuff through. So I don't know, I think not quite sure how do you work on getting them to figure that out to make it so that they can actually get something done when they have the ability to get it done.
I think that was where, towards the end, I don't like the word lame duck. It seems ableist. So I would call absolute absurdity duck because that's really what it is. So during an absolute absurdity duck session, I think there were a lot of conversations around that. Like, why can't you get to an agreement? And sometimes it's, money that they're not agreeing on. Sometimes it's, this isn't equitable and I'm not agreeing because it's not equitable. And someone else is like, oh, this is equitable enough for us, right? There was a lot of division. And I think there were some really frank conversations among the environmental organizations and our environmental allies about like, this has to change and stop. What an absolute waste. And I know there were leaders from every environmental organization in the coalitions with those environmental champions and those who could have been better, right? About like how we fix this and how we change this because we can't keep using the same broken game plan. And so there were also differences on some of the recycling packages about what is actually environmentally safe. I am not as deep into the package, but I know that some of the things that Sierra Club does not support are like any packages that have a pyrolysis plastic recycling element because it's not environmentally sound, and there are a lot of problems with it. And so at this moment, we're not supporting, but there are like, again, like that might be an oversimplification or slightly inaccurate because Sierra Club does work to get the best package forward. And one thing we are really good at is like understanding like this is not going to be perfect. We're not going to have everything we want, but this is an improvement and this is better. And we can keep working down the line because we can keep having conversations with these organizations and with these leaders.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you. Ryan, go ahead.
Okay, there we go. Sorry, I was getting sidetracked for a second. Yeah, essentially, too long didn't read version of that. Basically, there's usually there's a whip and everything, and in the House or and all in the Senate, etc. Um, when there isn't one doing that job internally, it's the job of, just as far as I can tell, of nonprofits, other interest groups to act as a whip, basically. Yeah, that's it.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're 100% accurate. And that's what we saw a lot of most of the good legislation, the positive environmental legislation that has been passed, the key wins is exactly that. You have tremendously talented and knowledgeable staff in all of these organizations, Michigan Environmental Council, Michigan Recycling Coalition, Michigan, the League of Conservation Voters. They all have very good staff who are good at this. I think, and I might be biased, the political and legislative duo of Christy McGillivray and Tim Minotis for Sierra Club Michigan are some of the best and most brilliant at this work. And some of the huge wins have been that coalition of those teams moving positive stuff forward, like meeting with those legislators, helping craft language, like helping them to hear from their constituents about, why something is a major concern and why their constituents support or oppose something.
Yep. Yeah, we have a lot of great man theory type, great person theory stuff in our history and everything, but change doesn't actually happen just because of one person. We didn't get the 1964 or the Civil Rights Act because of JFK. We got it because people were up his butt so much that he had to do it.
Exactly. And that's why, like, for us, like, our members and volunteers show up. So we, recently I think on maybe a Sunday night, when the budget freezes started coming out, um, we had a Sunday night, they're like, we need to show up at offices on Tuesday morning. Who's in? And we had over 200 people sign up by Monday morning, right? And show up. And then we had other people who didn't sign up or register officially who just arrived. And we showed up at offices and we're like, hey, we need to have a talk. What are you doing to protect democracy, to protect the environment for your constituents? And so that is the power. No one person, no one organization takes it. That's why we talk about like the reciprocity of support of from between organizations and stakeholders and bringing it to the community level. Like we all live in this community, we all volunteer and work in different places, but we're all here on this call because we care about our environment, and we care about our future on the planet. And so that's how that solidarity brings us together and really makes a difference. And I think we've all seen the graphic of, the shark and then the bunch of little fish figure out how to organize and they go after the shark, right? Once we get that really happening en masse, um, we see big changes.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment, Sarah, regarding the legislature in lame duck. The Dems didn't lose, but lost the majority in the House when two of their reps accepted, they became mayors of their local communities, and those seats were vacant. So from the time they accepted, the mayor positions until elections were held or appointments, I can't remember which, to fill those seats, the House didn't meet. And I think that was a very big missed opportunity where the Dems could have worked with the Republicans and found areas of interest where they could have collaborated and gotten things pushed through. But partly because of term limits and partly because of the way politics just are these days, everybody is standing on the sidelines shouting across at each other, and it doesn't work. We've got to find a way to get beyond that.
Yeah, 100%. I heard lots of loud, sweary words coming from all of the offices in our building during that time because there was important work that we needed to move and it was just sitting, right? Um, it's heartbreaking to think of the missed opportunities. And I think those are some of the conversations I was mentioning earlier that staff from organizations and constituents have been having with their leaders.
Well,
Yeah,
and
I think it was almost 3 months, I believe, that they didn't meet.
yeah.
And you can't push any legislation through unless you have the House in session.
Mhm. Well, and it was interesting in that conference where they were saying that, things weren't going to happen, but the reminder that the big uh, what are the laws that just went through in 2022, the landfill, all of that, all those went through, and those were, in Republican majority. So compromise and working through that did happen, but which was nice.
And that's one of the things that we've tried to like um that we use as a positive talking point and that we have been able to get good things passed in what we felt like were dire situations, right? If you're willing to have conversations and work with people. And there have been big environmental wins under Republican administrations, not as often as we would love to see or but yeah, there's hope as long as you're continuing to talk. And I think again, it's that it has to come from like the local levels up. It can't come from like a top-down process. It has to come from like the grassroots engagement and working with the folks who are in policy and decision-making spaces and showing up to those policy and decision-making spaces. Sometimes it's tricky to get information on when those spaces are occurring.
Mhm. Is Sierra Club doing anything in terms of the landfill laws, that kind of stuff? I mean, in like implementing or working with pushing that more. And I just know that when at the conference we were talking about how the 35 cents up to $5 landfill. Um, is Sierra Club doing any of that work?
We're not leading on that, but we're certainly supporting. I haven't seen what our legislative priorities right now are because they're kind of changing a little bit, like what is going to be our main focus. I have a general idea of what our main focus is based on what we were continuing to work on from last year and our main goals for this year, but obviously things are changing
Yeah.
under the current administration. We're pivoting a little bit. So I know that their Sierra Club teams are doing some work on that. I can find out like how are our volunteers plugging in on that. I think it's mostly our local groups who are working in the areas where this is where these are occurring. And then some of our legislative team, I think, is supporting um, other legislative teams, other organizations on that work and keeping an eye on it. But I don't think it's like one of our it's not our political legislative team's key priority, but they are, it's definitely something that is environmental and will be having a light touch on at least.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have any work or projects that are specific to the Lansing area, or are most of your uh, I can't think of the word I want, statewide rather than just local issues?
No, we have local issues. So a lot of our political and legislative work obviously is a very heavy Lansing focus, as far as like people being able to get involved because we're right here. We have some pollinator projects and some gardening, some invasive species projects that we're teaming up on that are Lansing based. We also have in all the communities, so but Lansing is like where we're piloting it, a program that we're working on with our national team called Transit to Trails. And it's looking at how accessible green spaces, public green spaces are from public transit. We know CATA has some stuff on their website, so we're getting volunteers to start doing little scouting missions and taking these trips and finding out like how if is it actually accessible, how accessible is it, and then working with our team to help promote resources and policies and legislation that could help improve accessibility to trails from public transit. We know there's a huge amount of people who can't get to a natural space because of where they live and not having a car. So I think we just had someone who is going to be taking their mountain bike on the CATA bus and seeing how, like, what kind of trails they can get to with their mountain bike. Is it rideable? Is it safe? Um, so those are the garden project, outings for veterans. So yeah, we have local Lansing stuff. We're building up we're redoing our website so we can put a new landing page that has buttons for how you can get involved and take action based on your interests. So are you interested in forest protection, biodiversity? Go here. Political, legislative, you can tap here. So um, hopefully that'll be in the coming weeks revamped. But you can always learn about opportunities by contacting me. I'll drop my volunteer email address in the chat right now. We're in the middle of planning our state planning for the year. We're a little bit ahead of Sierra Club usually does theirs in March, and we're like, no, we need to know. Our volunteers need to know what we want to do right now. So we're just finishing up our planning. And then our fiscal year is changing. So this year is a little bit tricky on how and when we're able to launch certain projects that we're doing. But
I'll have to check the website then.
or I'm dropping my email here too.
While you're doing that, in kind of like in regard to the same question, what you do locally, I was curious about how much you collaborate with other groups in the state, like the Detroit group, and having worked there for quite a while, I saw Irma Leeper is on your list. She's outstanding. Yeah. What a great person to work with. And it sounds like you do have some dialogue with her, which is great.
Yeah, we work closely with all of our groups. So right now, we lost a tremendous amount of leadership in every sense of the word during the pandemic. We had folks step away, we had folks move, we had folks pass away. It was a really rough time for us. And we are rebuilding those groups and networks now. And also Sierra Club at the national level changed how our student groups interact. And so we're rebuilding the student groups as well. But we do communicate with all those groups. We no longer have a central mission group, which serves the greater Lansing area. So it would be our counties. I'm trying to get some folks involved who are interested in not doing a group because there's a lot of red tape involved with being an official Sierra Club group, but a network where we can still meet and collaborate and share resources. And we do share resources across the state, and we also share resources with our partner groups because it's the best way to be the most effective in times where, funding can be a little bit tricky. Because we all know that donors might, pull back a little bit if they're feeling, if a lot of our donors are unemployed because they were federal employees, there's a lot of things that are impacting how people are getting involved. But right now we're seeing a surge in people wanting to volunteer. And what we know is we have gaps where we used to have very active groups and we don't. And so we're trying to fill those gaps and get more of a statewide collaboration happening. And we're doing that by engaging state-based issues teams. So like people who want to work on CAFOs, you can be from all over the state and there's ways for you to work together. Irma's amazing. I love Irma. And we're hoping there's a lot of interest in this area to replicate the program that Irma and now Mama Erin, Preston Johnson are around rain barrels and rain gardens. And there's interest in doing something like that in this area. Right now it's only in Detroit. So we're trying to collaborate with them on that. We lost our local group leader because Dave Erickson, I don't know if any of you knew Dave Erickson. He was pretty big in a lot of different communities. Here in the Lansing area. Dave Erickson was a traveling nurse, and during the pandemic, Dave went out west to take a job in Portland, or Seattle. I think it was Seattle, during the pandemic, and fell in love as a kayaker with sea kayaking, and was like, "I am never coming back." So we lost that group here, and that's why we haven't been as active. And there's restrictions on how we can't like lead a group or a network, but we can help embolden it. So we're trying to, Ann Wywity is a fixture in Meridian Township. Many of you may know Ann Wywitty, longtime Sierra Club volunteer, and then staff, and then executive committee chair. Ann Wywitty was doing a lot of leadership in that group as well and stepped back. Ann and I both had COVID very badly in 2021. And so we're rebuilding that group and we're excited. And that mentorship and connection and partnership with the groups from around the state is the key to making it successful. So I'm sorry, that was really rambly.
That's good. Thank you. We stick to pretty close to 10. So just wanted to say that we will wrap this up, but we can always add in questions that we and then say come back. So if we want to do that. So let's just gather our last thoughts, and we really appreciate you coming. This has been really helpful, and I think it's great to be able to talk to somebody that's locally doing the work that all of us are so interested in. And so do you have any last thoughts that you'd like to share with us, Cecilia?
Thank you so much for making the time. It's great to talk to you. We're always willing to come back. We can have if you have a specific issue, like we really want to know more about Line 5, we can bring our lead volunteers from Line 5 to talk to you, or whatever the issue is. If you really have a lot of questions about the political and legislative stuff, we can get someone from that team over. So we have a deeper bench than we used to, which is great. And and so we'd love to, anytime you would like to have a talk, and I will share resources after so you can stay in touch and figure out how to get involved. One of the things we'll be doing is Sierra Club National is launching these climate action hours that talk about like really impactful ways that you can get involved, the current information on legislation or threats to the environment. And we'll be streaming those live we'll be streaming those into the Lansing office and having people get together in person there, just kind of be in community together. So
that's great.
Still need your email.
It's in the chat, and I have saved the chat, so I will send that to Leroy.
Actually, you could send it to the list if you want directly, and that'll go to everyone who's on the list. If you're not on the list, I encourage you to add to the Google list.
And I'm sorry, I will share, following this call, after a presentation, I always share a little, sort of thanks for having me, and here's some helpful links. So you'll get that information.
Okay. Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. We all appreciate it. Thank you, Kim, for
I was going to say the same thing. Thank you, Kim. And if any of you have suggestions for other speakers, or Kim suggested one a few days ago, and now we have that speaker here today. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. We'll see you guys later. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks again, Cecilia, for being flexible.
No problem. Thanks for the invite. And maybe I'll see you at another luncheon soon.
Great to see you.
I hope so.
Bye.